Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris, and welcome to another LEGO Ninjago Dragons Rising set review, where today we're going to be taking a look at the brand new Destiny's Bounty Race Against Time. This has been a pretty controversial Destiny's Bounty. A lot of people are really split on the way the front of the ship looks, on the overall color scheme and composition, and I can't wait to showcase this and share my own thoughts on this very unique LEGO build. And so, I think it's just time to jump into the review, and definitely stay tuned to Duckbricks for even more reviews of all of the other LEGO Ninjago Dragons Rising sets coming very, very soon. And so, let's jump into the Destiny's Bounty. Alright, so here we have set number 71797, Destiny's Bounty Race Against Time. Now, at the time this is being recorded, the show has not aired yet in the US, so I do not know what exactly this Race Against Time exactly is going to be. I assume that's going to be some sort of event in the show itself. It comes with 1,739 pieces, making it one of the largest Destiny's Bounty sets yet. Not quite the largest compared to the movie one, but it is still the largest TV show one, and retailing for $160 US as well as 150 euros, which by a price per part ratio sounds like a pretty good deal, but also makes it pretty much one of the most expensive TV show bounties ever, and it's gonna have to do a lot to earn its price tag. Now, the set comes with 6 different minifigures and 1 new baby dragon mold. All of these minifigures either appear in other sets throughout the wave or are repeats from previous waves, like the Wu minifigure from Ninjago Core, and the other figures are Kai, Lloyd, Aaron, Sora, so you have most of the main team for the season. Notably, Nia is not included, which I felt was particularly strange because the dragon really does kind of feel almost like a water dragon, and obviously in the marketing, the main core team for this season is supposed to be Lloyd, Kai, Nia, Aaron, and Sora, so I think it's kind of strange that Nia isn't included, but unfortunately we just have these ones. You also have the baby dragon Ryu, as well as only one villainous member from Imperium, Raptin right there, who appears in several other sets in the wave. Now, this bounty is really unique for a number of reasons, but first I want to start with a quick look at the minifigures themselves. We did a very in-depth look at all the minifigures as a mega review a few days ago, so do go check that out if you are interested, but otherwise let's just jump into the minifigures right now. First off, we have the Master Wu minifigure, which does recur from Ninjago Core. This is the same exact minifigure that we got in the earlier wave of core sets, so nothing necessarily super special is going on here. I think it is a nice minifigure, although I do really miss the face print that he had for the season 11 onwards TV show waves with the beard going up on the side and the ponytail in the back. I just felt like that was a lot more detailed and more interesting for Wu to have animation wise. Unfortunately, because they are using the core minifigure, they have updated what the minifigure looks like in the animation to reflect this face print, so he kind of has lost some of his defining characteristics that they introduced for season 11, which I think is a bit of a shame. Next up, we have Kai here. Kai is in his standard Dragons Rising outfit. I gave a lot of time and effort into taking a look at these minifigures in the early minifigure review, so we're just going to very quickly take a look at the different facial prints once you have the armor removed. Here is what that face print looks like on the front. Here's what it looks like on the back. It is a new expression for Kai, which is really nice. It is somewhat similar to the expression that he had from the Secrets of the Forbidden Spinjitzu spinner minifigures, which also had kind of a smiling smirk, but it is still good to get these in standard mainline sets, and while I think the suits of the ninja do look pretty cool, one of my biggest disappointments is that, well, you can't turn the heads, and the armor is part of the mask itself, which is a little bit disappointing. From there, we can take a look at Lloyd. One of the cool things about this figure is that he does have unique energy blast type effects on the sides of his mask. You can see that Kai has some fire blast pieces, and when you remove the headpiece here, that is what that looks like with the armor and mask off, and then a nice, very serious expression on the back, which I think fits the character of Lloyd pretty perfectly, especially because he is being set up to be a master this season, so he's really kind of growing into his own and maturing as a character. Here we have the baby Ryu dragon. This is such an adorable brand new mold. I love how you can see the scales moving alongside the back of the dragon. Personally, I think it would have been cool if this was more rubberized so you could flap the wings. Right now the wings are just plastic and fixed, but it is not bad, and I do think that is a really adorable expression, one of the cutest new characters from Ninjago. Next up, we have the New Blood. These are members of the new team. This is Aaron right here. He has a new dual molded cowl component with a gold spike on the front, as well as a keyed orange or flame yellowish orange piece right here. Now, removing the armor, this is what the face looks like underneath, and he only has one expression because when you put the hairpiece on, which is only included right now in Ninjago City markets, you can actually see the back of his head. So I actually do like how they had the forward thinking to not give him an alternate expression, because then you can use him with the hair and still be totally fine. He also is wielding a brand new grappling hook element, which seems to be his signature weapon in the show itself from the clips that we have seen. This is a little bit hard to pose, it's somewhat unwieldy. I guess that you can maybe get him to hold it in his other hand like this, so that's a pose, but definitely not the most easy to pose weapon, but I do like how they're trying something completely new and different with him. Finally, on the hero team, we have Sora here. Now, Sora is probably my favorite minifigure from the new Dragons Rising Wave. She has a really nicely detailed printed golden arm. The last time that we saw printing for the arms in mainline Ninjago TV series sets was with Cole RX from Day of the Departed. Sure, we saw some for the Ninjago movie and for some Bricktober packs, but those are a little bit more special and of higher budget, and I really appreciate how LEGO is treating these very seriously and giving them a lot more detail. Sora is actually an escaped member from Imperium. Now, we have some details of her backstory that leaked, which I will not be going over right now, but I like how you have different alternate expressions, which, of course, one of them has the glowing eyes, which we have seen in a lot of trailers and clips, showing that she is invoking her elemental power, which I think this is a really cool look. Love the dark blue contrast with the bright coral, and overall the color scheme of this character is just so cool. Lastly, we have Raptin wielding a unique accessory found only in the set, with a grappling hook being brick built up here. He also has the new dual molded Techno Sword, which has the holographic sword element. This can be held in a lot of different ways, so you can kind of treat it like a gun that we've seen in the show. You can also have him hold the blade right here, so there's a lot of different configurations of the sword itself, and Raptin himself does have two different expressions, a serious one and an angry one, where you can see his golden teeth. Now, removing the new armor piece, you can also see what the torso looks like underneath. This is the same torso used for a lot of the Hunter generals, but it is nice to see it being recurring here, and I like the contrast between people like Raptin, who have the members of Imperium being fully decked out in a ton of detail and technological lines, and then if you put a ninja next to him, it almost feels like they are from two different themes, which in this case really does work because they are supposed to be from different realms. But with the minifigs out of the way, I think it's time that we focus in on the main Destiny's Bounty itself. So this is basically the main part of the set. There's no other build included. All you basically get in the entire set for $160 is this Destiny's Bounty. So I think the first thing to demonstrate is, well, how the flying mechanism works, because every bounty has to have one. This one is surprisingly really simple. It's probably the simplest flying mechanism out of any of the Destiny's Bounty sets so far, which I'm honestly a little bit mixed on. Obviously, as you can see, you have a knob at the top here, which instead of actuating from the bottom, which is how a lot of the other bounties worked, you instead just crank the knob on the top, and that will cause the wings to open or close. So it's a super simple type of thing. It is similar to the way that the wings or sails opened up on the original 2012 bounty, but obviously that one was controlled by a lever and a string mechanism. Here, it literally is just done by gravity. Like, there is a knob underneath there that these just rest on. It's simple, it does the trick just fine. I think it would have been still cool to have it actuated from the bottom so you could pretend that the characters themselves in these sets were controlling it, but that's not a big deal. The other type of quote-unquote mechanism, although I hesitate to call it a mechanism, is on the back here, where you can see you have an array of booster engines. Now, the way this is supposed to work is you just rotate these on downwards, and that's it. They're not even connected through the middle. They literally are just on turntables, which is interesting. I think aesthetically it looks okay when this is flying. Like, this is a pretty cool look having the bounty be in flight. It's not bad, and I do like how you kind of have a similar aesthetic to some of the original bounty sets from 2012, and of course a legacy one with the engines arcing down here. It feels somewhat traditional in that sense, but I also feel like this is, again, the simplest mechanism where you literally just have the engines mounted on ratchet joints. And I don't know, with the Destiny's Bounty set, I think one of my favorite things, and maybe this is just me, but one of my favorite things about every single bounty set is just the really interesting mechanism for flight. Obviously, the very first one had engines that kind of split open and moved like that. The final flight of the Destiny's Bounty in 2015 for Possession had a crazy cool mechanism where you could pull a gun out of the back and then the engines would rotate forwards, split in half, and then rotate backwards, which looked so cool. The Legacy one had a function where when you moved these engines downwards, jet engines would sprout out from the front, just like in the show, and this just doesn't really have any of that. It is almost surprisingly simple. You literally just have these on ratchets. They are fully individually movable, so that's how that works. They are not really attached to each other. But the thing is that these are basically just on ratchet joints, and honestly, that was a little bit disappointing to me. Because again, I just love seeing cool mechanical functions in LEGO, and especially with Destiny's Bounties, they usually have a very cool mechanical function to transform them, and both of the functions, the sail being just kind of twisted by gravity here, like none of these are actually connected up, they just have a bar underneath them that moves them outwards, and then these being just on ratchet joints is honestly not really the most interesting thing to me, and I definitely feel like the other bounties have this one beat in terms of mechanism. Now, thankfully, because they did not have a mechanism going through it or spend a lot of parts on the mechanisms themselves, they actually tried to give this a good amount of interior space, which is something that I can really appreciate. But first of all, I think we should showcase one of the main features of the bounty, and this is definitely a very controversial feature. Some people like it, some people don't. I'm honestly kind of mixed on it for a few reasons, and let me explain why. So obviously on the front here we have not just a dragon figurehead, but an actual dragon. This is some sort of a dragon. It looks to me like a water dragon, but I don't know exactly what it is. Sora is flying it on the box art, but it seems like there's a mix of all sorts of different dragons, either elemental or non-elemental, that we've seen throughout the new series so far. But the way this works is that you can lift up this entire platform, so basically all of this rotates upwards, and then you can actually remove the dragon from the inside of the ship itself. Now this is a completely posable dragon on its own. It basically feels like it could have been just like a $15 to $20 set by itself, because you have all the mixel joints which you can unfurl the legs and get this to be kind of walking. Honestly, the dragon feels a little bit awkward to me. Like, I don't know, something about the proportions doesn't seem quite right in terms of the way this is set up, but I think it is a fairly decent model on its own. I mean, you can use it as a posable articulated dragon, where you can see you have the neck and heads that can be moved around on ball joints, you have the cannons on the back which can be rotated back and forth, you have the wings which are actually recolored for the first time in the set in the flame yellowish orange color. These are the original Seabound blade decal elements, and then you just have a lot of nice bright azure colors, which again feels like it fits Nia's color scheme really well, but for some reason she's not included in the set itself. It's a fairly serviceable dragon. I think it's cool how they integrated it into the front of the bounty, but because of that, the front feels very hollow and empty without the dragon actually on it. Now, the unfortunate thing is that because they needed space to fit the dragon in, as you can see, this is literally just hollow. Like, there is not even a platform underneath for pieces to be able to cover it up, so when even this cover is down, you cannot pose minifigures here when the dragon is not on it. So that feels very hollow to me. If this is flying from above, you can clearly see that there's just very gappy interior or back portions on the ship itself, and it feels very strange to me because this has a lot of pieces, but clearly it is very dense in the way that certain small pieces are used, and you just don't have a lot of room in here to play with figures because there's almost too much space. There's too much space and no platform to put figures on. Now, that being said, this does, I think, look pretty cool with the dragon on the inside, but it definitely is something that you do need to be aware of, especially when playing around with the set, is there's not actually as much space, at least in the front, as you may think, because you really need to have the dragon in there for the set to look remotely good. If the dragon is not in there, the set honestly does not really look that good. Also, it is a little bit finicky to just get the dragon back in there. I mean, I'm kind of messing around with it right now, trying to get the angle right, and you do have to play around with the way it works. It's perfectly serviceable. I think it is a cool idea to have a dragon being flying out of the bounty itself, and I think for the Dragon's Rising season, that makes the most sense for the story to have a dragon being housed in the front. But I definitely feel like aesthetically it did suffer because of it in both configurations. In this configuration, the dragon head is cool. I mean, I think it looks fine, but there's a huge amount of azure on the front here, and they did try to integrate the azure color scheme on the back, but the head also does feel a little bit small for me in terms of the way it sticks out. Usually with bounties, I expect there to be like a really large dragon head at the front, and this one feels a little small because they had to make it proportional with the rest of the dragon, and then obviously without the dragon, it just feels incomplete. So that's how I feel about it. The dragon itself I think is okay to play with, but I'm a little mixed on the concept. I don't hate it, I'm not entirely against it, I think it was a cool idea, but in execution, I'm not so sure. One thing I do like, however, is the way that the sides of the ship are built here. The building techniques are actually pretty cool. I love the way the anchor is made. You have a nice Destiny's Bounty text sticker on the side of it, and all of these are mounted at an angle with studs on the sides, so it really does come together very well. I also like that there is a little place to sit and drink tea, as all ships really need. Moving onwards, one thing that I did appreciate when talking to the designers of the set during a roundtable interview for the LEGO Ambassador Network is that it's kind of a recurring joke among the show and the fandom that the Destiny's Bounty always gets destroyed. So what they tried to do with the set was to make it look like it has a very strong reinforced metal core to it. Like they specifically built this to look like a strong core, which I think is really funny to me. And I actually really like the shaping of it, especially like top down. You can see that there's some nice railing on it, then it kind of slopes inwards, curves on outwards. These are almost like engine intakes with the transparent blue pieces. I just think the shaping is really cool for this set and gives us something a little bit different compared to other bounties that we've seen in the past. Moving on to the back here, we have a somewhat traditional back part of it with a lantern on the back, great big jet engines as well, with of course these being able to rotate, and then you have the two flags on the back, which most of the Destiny's Bounty sets have had. There is a place to steer the ship up on the front here, so you have a telescope and a compass. And then we can now take a look at the interior of the set because there's actually a good amount of stuff to see here. Removing this element right here, let's just set that aside, move this back. You can see that this is kind of a pen for baby Ryu. This is a dragon holding area, so what happens is you can open these up like so. And this is just kind of a nice little play area for him. You have just the perfect amount of space. The instruction manual actually tells you to just put him right there, which I think is just so adorable. That just works out really well. He's got a ball to play with, a bone that is new in yellow, recolored for the first time in yellow, kind of a chewing toy for him to play with. Interestingly enough, that piece appeared on Pick-a-Brick months ago, so a lot of people are wondering what set it would appear in, and finally now we know. And of course you have a lot of snacks for him as well, pretzels, carrots, a chicken leg, an apple, and whatnot, so all sorts of different nice things for him to play around with. It's a small space, but I think it makes sense for holding a baby dragon. We put the apple back where it is supposed to go in the crate there, and then we can just have this be fully closed up and move on from there. Next up, we have another section of the ship itself, which is this room right here, and this entire thing just lifts up, and it kind of feels like a traditional Asian-inspired type of design of building. You have swords along the sides of the windows, and a map, which is actually something that we can see in the show itself. In clips from the TV show, this exact sticker was like hand-drawn on a piece of paper that was Kai's illustration, so I think it's pretty cool how they actually put that as a sticker in the set itself. And then you have some sort of a seal or something, some scroll up here, which I'm assuming is maybe also supposed to appear in the show. Sometimes stickers are hit or miss, they either are in the show or they're not, but it seems like at least this sticker is already featured in the show itself, so I'm curious what the story relevance of this is. Otherwise, there's not a lot of stuff to do in this space. It is fairly cramped. I mean, you can fit minifigures in it, but it really is just meant to be able to pose figures and have them be aboard the Bounty. Now with that section removed, the entire bottom of the Bounty thankfully does have an interior as well, and this is also cramped, but is also one of the nicest Bounty interiors we've gotten other than the movie one. So the story here is that you have a set of bunk beds, you have Lloyd's original core hood, which seems to be a pretty important part of the storytelling. There is a video game console with a reference to the 2021 Ninjago Legacy Epic Battle Kai vs. Skulkin set, where you can see that he is battling a Skulkin there in almost like a Mortal Kombat inspired outfit. You have some weapons being housed on the side here. Moving this around, you have some more details. You have kind of a map to the new world of Dragons Rising. There's some references to Imperium and the soldiers, as well as Baby Dragon Ryu. And then you have some sushi and tea on one of the beds themselves. I'm assuming this is where, I guess, Lloyd and Kai are supposed to live, because Eren and Sora have their own apartment in Ninjago City Markets. So I think it's nice that this does actually include some living space for the ninja, as any good bounty should. Now, let's close it up, and it's time to give my final thoughts on the composition of the set itself, and of course the ever-important, is this worth the price? So closing up the bounty here is a little bit finicky to get this closed up. You just kind of have to align it. There we go. Okay, so this is the Destiny's Bounty Race Against Time. It is a brand new type of bounty, and it is retailing for $160 US. And that is really high. Honestly, I don't really know how I feel about that. Because if you look at the piece count, other than the movie bounty, which had 2,295 pieces, and also retailed for $160 US. Huh. Really? That's crazy. I didn't even realize that. I just looked this up just now. The movie Destiny's Bounty retailed for $160 US, same price as this. Came with 2,295 pieces as opposed to the 1,739 pieces here. So this is tied with the most expensive and largest bounty. Okay, now the thing to consider is that was back in 2017. Obviously there is some amount of inflation involved, and probably if that set were to come out today, it would be a lot more expensive. But that is a really harsh comparison. I think that paints this in a really negative light, that it is the same price as the movie bounty, which is just so much more detailed, has so much more interior room, there's a lot going on in that set. Huh, wow, okay, that's interesting. The other thing is that the Legacy Destiny's Bounty has 1,781 pieces, which is actually more pieces than this, and retailed for $130 US. And that had a really cool mechanism for the flight deployment. It had a great interior space, it was really accurate to the show, and came with some new minifigures. So that just came out in 2021. It is now 2023. This is $30 more for less pieces, and that is honestly putting a lot of things into perspective. I feel like this is kind of overpriced. Now that I've taken a look at the other Destiny's Bounties and refreshed myself in terms of the price and piece count, it's the same price, but a lot less pieces than the movie bounty, and it's $30 more expensive, but still less pieces than the Legacy bounty. Now that being said, there are a lot of large pieces used here. There's a lot of large curved elements here, there's curved pieces here, but it also doesn't feel like it is really worth the very steep price tag that you have to pay for it. $160 is a lot, and while the price per part ratio is under 10 cents, like that is a pretty good price per part ratio, maybe this says more about the incredibly great value of previous bounty sets than it says about the poor value of this set, but I really am not feeling $160 from this. This feels like an $120, maybe $130 set, especially because if you look at it, there's not a ton of interior space. There's no interior space here, but that's because it holds Dragon. The middle of it is just a solid core, so there's nothing that you can do there. And the interior space is mostly just centered around the back here, which is nice, it's not bad. But it also feels like it is not as impressive as some of the other bounties out there. Now, they could have saved this by having a really crazy mechanism. I think it would have been really cool to have a more interesting mechanism for the flight mechanics, but they did not do that. This has the simplest mechanism, other than the movie bounty, which didn't even fly. This has the simplest mechanism out of all of the bounties we've gotten to date, even the first one. And that is a bit of a con to me. I was really excited for what new mechanism a new Destiny's Bounty would have, and there just isn't one. Now, not everything about the set is bad. I think this is a really decent set. Like, it is a very solid construction. The build is great. I love the detail around the buildings itself. It just looks really cool. The way the window is done there is really nice. I like the slanting down roof here. That has a nice aesthetic to it. And in flight, I think it actually looks pretty cool in flight. When the wings are unfurled and the engines are all the way pointed downwards, the flight mode is pretty cool. It is very simple, but it does look nice in flight, and it was a really nice idea to have this dragon be actually sprouting out of the frontier. It's a cool idea and concept for the Dragons Rising show. However, the minifigure selection is nothing special. It probably has one of the least interesting minifig selections of the entire wave. It also feels like Nia is notably missing from the set. There's a dragon that is basically the same color scheme as Nia. The main core team that we know is being featured in the show are all these characters plus Nia, so it feels weird to not have her, especially for $160. And I don't know, I definitely feel like this should have been closer to $130. Maybe it was a victim of price increases, who knows, but I just think an $160 Destiny's Bounty, as we saw in 2017, had the potential to be really good, and this is just average. I think it's just okay. There are a lot of things I like about it. I like the shaping here. I like the work done for the building. Don't get me wrong, it's a really fun and great set to play around with, but for the price, I'm just not feeling it. But that's honestly just my opinion, and I'm really curious to hear yours. So of course, let me know in the comments. Do you think this is worth $160? I think it's a great set, but it's a great $130 set, not $160. That's all I have for this review, and thanks for watching. Alright, and with that, we have summed up our review of the Destiny's Bounty Race Against Time. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of the set, and how do you think it stacks up against the other versions of the Destiny's Bounty? This was a really fun one to put together and review, so thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon, and bye for now.